Okay, welcome to another episode of A Few Minutes with Beep. This week we're going to work with a couple of my favorite filters as well as a little bit of filter modulation. I hope you'll find it pretty fun. This time around we're going to start off with a couple of simple devices. First of all, one of the FM oscillators that we saw in the oscillator episode, and we're going to use this stereo output. Now, just to kind of get a good and interesting sound, one with a lot of harmonics, we're going to hook this up, turn the DSP on, and lock the patch and just play around with the ratios and depth amounts until we get a nice raspy sound. All right, that sounded pretty interesting. So now I'm going to disconnect those patch cords and go into the Beep filter category. And the first one that I'm going to grab is the MMF. This is an emulation of an analog multi-mode filter, and I like it because, first of all, it's got a fairly gentle slope, but it also has a nice visual here that allows us to kind of see what's going on. What we're going to do is we're going to place that in between the oscillator and the outputs. Again, turn the DSP on, and you can hear that it greatly reduces the harmonic content of the sound. Now, I never like working in terms of offsets. I much prefer a raw frequency display, and now I can see not only that I'm adjusting the frequency here, but I can also see what the look of the filter is in this little graphic on the right-hand side. You can see as the frequency increases, we kind of see it run up the frequency spectrum and vice versa. And then also, if I increase the resonance, we see the resonant peak show up. Now, this works in low pass, high pass, or band pass mode, as well as a notch mode, which I have to admit I virtually never use, but might be good for emulating phase shifters or whatever. But in our case, we're going to stick with the low pass filter mode with a modestly high resonance. Now, this is already pretty great. We can do really nice filtering stuff. If we had a keyboard or whatever connected, we could actually even use the CV to track 1 volt per octave if we wanted to. But I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to unlock my patch, go into the beat section, go into the LFO section, grab the simplest LFO, which is called just LFO. I'm going to take this LFO, which is kind of a standard LFO, and you'll see that it has this a frequency control and not really anything else. So what I'm going to do is, I like triangle LFOs, so I'm going to take the trial and run it into CV1. And when I do that, lock my patch and start bringing up CV1, you'll see that I start getting sort of a pulsating. In this case, a pulsating that occurs at 1 hertz or 1 cycle per second. I can actually slow that down, which is kind of a nice thing. I'm going to increase my frequency. And now I can hear a really nice throbbing of the filter sound. This is really great, and the higher my resonance setting, the more that peak jumps up and then brings out a specific frequency. Again, if I can change to high pass, or even band pass. And by changing the CV amount, I can determine how wide the variation is that the LFO provides. So that's a really quick look at the MMF filter. I really like this filter because while it's not a really hard filter, what I like about it is that it has a nice smooth character. The resonance has a nice bite to it, and I have access to all these different filter types without having to exchange filters. Now, I'm going to go to something completely different, the other of my favorite filters. This thing is called the spectral filter. And what the spectral filter does is basically it gives us a view of the spectral content we are expected to filter. So you can see it starts off with a bunch of little peaks. Those peaks give us a little bit of sound, but quite frankly, aren't super clear. What actually works better is for us to kind of draw in a form. So I'm going to start by selecting Contour A and draw something that's kind of low frequency heavy. So I just click in here, and you can kind of hear the spectral changes as I draw that in. Now next I'm going to move to Contour B, and I'm going to do something that's a little bit high frequency oriented. So you can hear it gets a little heavier on the high frequencies. You can again hear the spectrum kind of bite in. So now I can jump back and forth between these two, or more interestingly, I can go to this modulation mode. And what modulation mode does is it allows me to mix between Contour A and B, either manually with an external slider or something, or much more interestingly, with something like an LFO. So now you see how you can get these kind of evolving things. Now I made two very simple filters, but what if we do something a little more complex? I'll go back to Contour A, and I'm going to draw something that's got a couple of camel humps here. I'm going to go to Contour B and draw a thing that has a couple of ramps, right? So now A is a little humpy thing, B is a little rampy thing. If I move back to modulation, I see this great visual display of a constantly morphed shape between those two shapes. It gives a really great sound. And then I can choose whether I want a linear spread of frequencies or if I want to use the logarithmic spread, which tends to follow the contours of natural frequencies a little better. But you can see that the spectral filter is great for pads and backgrounds because you can get kind of ever-evolving sounds without a lot of work. It's a really fun filter to work with and something that is definitely a part of my everyday beep use. So I hope that this helps you kind of see some new ways to use filtering, gives you a couple of filters that you can play around with, and I hope you enjoy it. Have a great time, and I'll catch you next time around.